Today, I am welcomed with my incredible client, Lilia, who is a TEDx speaker with over 12 million views. She is a best-selling author and a brand coach. Lilia, welcome to Behind the Business.
Kia ora, Sophia. I'm so excited to be talking with you about what is one of my most favorite topics, story, but then my second most favorite topic, business. So yeah, really happy to be here. And hey to everyone who's listening, as we say, haere mai, welcome, kia ora, hello, and te reo Māori. I'm from New Zealand, so that's my language. I'm a Māori woman as well, or a Māori wahine, as we say.
I'm so happy you're here because there is just no one else I would want to speak to other than yourself when it comes to building a personal brand and sharing your story to help enhance your brand and get your
Yeah,
message out there. Because, you know, to have one of the top TEDx talks in the world and to be a
yeah.
published author and to have gone viral over so many media outlets over the years. I think you're definitely one of the best experts out there to actually speak about this. So I know everyone is going to absolutely love today. And how I want to actually really start is actually speaking about your story, because I know that that played a
Yeah,
really big role in what got you in this position to begin with. So could
yeah,
you share with everyone how you became a brand coach? Like, what actually got
yeah.
you into this through your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a valley on the west coast of New Zealand's South Island, and it was the most beautiful valley you've ever seen, like lush bush merging through pastures. Like we lived in with the mountains, the Southern Alps right behind us, and sparkling blue lakes surrounded by beech trees. It was paradise. And in this valley was a small place called Gloriavale, and it was a religious cult. So we lived in hostels, and one family would live in one room in these hostel floors. There were 3 stories high each hostel, and we lived in what was described to me as the way that Christ wanted us to live. So I grew up wearing a full length dress because we believe that you should always cover your skin. So my dress had a bodice. It was blue, dark blue. It went to my wrists, to my ankles, up to my neck, and I wore a white head covering. So if you think of Amish or Hutterite or any of those cultures that believe in covering and also wear full length clothing, that's what I grew up in wearing from the moment I was a young girl. And my grandfather founded this place. So he was an Australian evangelical Christian preacher, and he was a fundamentalist Christian and he was also a pilot. So he flew in the Air Force during the war. And after that he was evangelizing the word of God. And he would go into the outback and he would save people and baptize them and bring them to Christ. And people loved him. Like he was a storyteller through and through. And this is really how he built his entire campaign was on the power of storytelling. And people just flocked to him. And eventually he was invited over to New Zealand to become a pastor of one of the churches here. So he came over, brought his family over, my mum when she was very young, and he started a church out in Rangiora, just out of Christchurch, where I now live. And so what happened is he was a very much, it's my way or not at all kind of person. And so he ran into challenges where he had disagreements with the other church leaders, and there was a church split. And he took half of the congregation and they started to live in a place called Cust. And what happened is one day my grandfather saw a family drive to church in a beautiful car. They had their children all bundled up in the back, looking beautiful in all of their fancy clothing. And then he saw another family come to church on the same day, pushing their baby in a pram in the rain because they didn't have a car. And he thought, well, life shouldn't be like this. We should really have equal living among us. And so this led to this idea of how we intentionally lived to share everything together and live in unity as Christ wanted us to live. So everyone started to pool their bank accounts, their belongings. If you wanted a fishing rod, you'd go to the communal fishing cupboard and you'd borrow a fishing rod and return it there. So it wasn't yours anymore. Everything belonged to the community and it was all shared. And then they started like merging their businesses and growing food on the land. And this way, this commune started to evolve out in Cust, out of Christchurch. Eventually, they outgrew that place and travelled across to the west coast of New Zealand, South Island, where I was raised, and built what is now known as the Gloriavale Christian community. And for outsiders, this is really a cult. So it's a group of people who live in a very, very isolated valley and they follow these teachings. And so I grew up very strict religious rules around who I was in the world, how I was to be, what I could believe. I believed that men were superior to me. I was inferior and had to submit my will to men. Men had to submit their will to God, that God spoke to the leaders. And so there were all of these themes coming through, very high control religious indoctrination. And there were some points in time where I started to question what I was being taught or what I was seeing. And it wasn't immediate because remember, this is just my normal. So if you think of your life, your normal life as you go about it, for me, living in Gloriavale, wearing the dress, wearing the head covering, living in one room with my entire family was my version of normal. And so I didn't know anything different. But what happened is when I was very young, in my early teens, my sibling ran away from the church. Now, when you run away, you have to leave in the middle of the night with their clothes on your back and find your way to civilization. Like the nearest town is, I think, an hour's drive away and you're on foot. And also you don't want to get caught because if you get caught, you'll get taken back and thrown into this leaders meeting, they call it, which is basically a group of men sitting in a room. They bring a young person in, and then this person is basically told they're going to hell. They've given their heart to Satan and berated and just psychologically abused for hours on end. And this happened to a lot of my friends. So they had to just get away, and my sibling ran away. But this was my first experience of grief and loss. And so what eventually happened is I just carried on with my life, but I had to shun that person from my life. So burn their photographs. They weren't allowed to be considered to be my family anymore. And I did that. I was very young at the time.
Did that feel natural to do that, or did that feel wrong, even though you were told to do it?
It felt confusing. So I'm confused. I love this person, right? But also you're taught that this is what you have to do. And I wanted to be a good Christian girl. Like I was wanting to please, we children are in this environment. We're taught spare the rod, spoil the child. So I watched children being beaten from a very, very young age with leather belts, with alkathene pipes. I watched babies, and just trigger warning for anyone listening. I've watched babies being go black and blue with bruises all over their bodies. So, that was a horrible environment to be in, but this was what love was supposed to be. If you're a good parent, if you're a good Christian parent, you discipline your children. So we grew up believing that this type of treatment of children was discipline, and it's actually our parents loving us. And so I was treated this way growing up too, because my parents were also products of this environment. And that was what sort of started my questioning journey. I was very young, growing up into this world, being taught that I had to get baptized at 10 and give my life to God if I wanted to go to heaven. I had a deep fear of hell. I was so afraid that God could come back anytime in the rapture and take me away from my family. And if I didn't have my heart right with God, I was going to burn for eternity in a place of hellfire and brimstone, where I would be tortured by the devil and his demons. So there's all this heavy messaging that comes through in environments like this. And there's no one to question it. There's no other influences for me to really go, well, is there any other option? This is just what I'm being indoctrinated with as a child. And it's also, again, the power of the stories that we tell each other and the power of the stories we tell our children about what is real and the beliefs we tell them that create their reality for them. And so this is really a fear-based environment. And I start to question. I see a young boy in my high school class being beaten up by his school teacher because he just made a joke when we were at playing football. And I'm thinking, well, surely this person's going to be disciplined. But the next day, that same teacher's back in the classroom with us. And I'm thinking, how's this okay? Because I'm looking at that event as a young girl developing her own conscience, thinking, this isn't right. Something's not quite right here. And even when I was 6 years old, my school teacher wrote on my 6-year-old report card, which get read out to the entire community at dinner, Lilia demonstrates leadership qualities which could be useful as she gets older. And I think I'm going to get a big pat on the back for it. But as I'm sitting at the table waiting for my grandfather to read this to the congregation and say, you've done an amazing job, well done, then he read out this report card and he said, we don't want women like you. So I'm in shock. I am humiliated and embarrassed. I'm 6 years old. I start to cry, but I feel like I can't even cry. I look down at the plastic table like I am just waiting. And then he preaches for about an hour or just, to me, it felt like time stopped. But the role of the women in the church. Women aren't to be leaders. Women shouldn't speak out loud. Women should let men lead the home. Women shouldn't be stroppy or dress a certain way. So I'm taught very early on from my grandfather that this is the role of women in the society that I'm raised in. And this is how you should be. And if you're not that way, then we don't want you. You're not lovable, you're not acceptable, and you're not worthy. And so as I get older, another one of my siblings leaves. And I feel this grief. I don't even know what it is at the time. There's no language given to us for emotion. We're just taught, don't cry. Silly women always cry, and you're embarrassing if you cry. Like, there's a lot of emotional suppression in this place. And so my other sibling leaves, and I just know that I feel very low and very spaced out, like something's not quite right again, but I can't name it. I have no language for what's going on inside my body. And as I go on and I'm growing up, my parents start to question as well, because they've lost 2 kids now. And they're thinking, how do we live with ourselves? And they were saying, well, we believe that God wants us to be with our children and to not shun our children. So they started to question the church's teachings, which is very much a big no-no. And then what happened is eventually they approached the leaders and said, we want to go live on the outside in a house with our 2 children who have left, and our goal is to bring them back to the church. But what eventually happened is we started our faith deconstruction process. We went to live in this house because we were granted permission, but I started to be influenced by the outside world, by listening to Justin Timberlake, by not wearing the headscarf one day, or, trying a pants on or different clothing. There were all these moments where I started to really strip away those stories that I had been told about who I could be and what was okay and what was not okay, what was a sin. I shaved my legs for the first time. Oh my God. Shaved my legs. And I was like, wow, this feels amazing. I was having all of these experiences that were dismantling my idea and my reality of what I believed to be true. And that is the process of faith deconstruction. You really are completely dismantling a story that you have been told about the world and your role in it and how you see it. And so as I question, then my friend comes to me and tells me she's been placed in an arranged marriage, and she is going to be forced to move to India with this man because the marriage is in the cult where I was raised are arranged. And I just looked at her and I said, you have to leave. And in that moment, when I gave her permission to leave, I knew that I had to give myself that same permission to walk away from everything that I believed to be true and had been told to be true from the moment I'd come out the womb. I was willing then to walk away. And that is what eventually led to me leaving the church.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I can only imagine how difficult it would have been going into the quote unquote real world and having to relearn everything and change your beliefs and
Yeah.
question things. And also, you would have seen and witnessed and experienced so many things that'd be so different to what you were used to. Like, what was that
Yeah.
actually like in that transitional period?
Yeah, there was this like sense of excitement, right? Everything was so new, and I was an 18-year-old teenage girl that now has some freedoms that she's never been afforded. So it was like I used an EFTPOS card for the first time and I had no clue how to use it. I walked up to the lady, and I think it was JJ's, the store, to buy a pair of red jeans that I'd seen that I wanted, and they were tight, skinny leg jeans because that was the fashion at the time. And I had no clothes other than this blue dress that I'd been wearing. So I walked up to use the EFTPOS machine, and then I stood there with it in my hand, having no clue what to do with it. And I had to get the person at the counter to show me. I said, how do I do this? And they said, well, you swipe it here and you punch in a number and then you've paid for your clothes. And so that was like a brand new experience for me. And it was exciting, but it was also really scary. And I felt stupid. I felt like, well, everyone should know these things. And, one of my friends said to me, oh, do you know who John Legend is? And I said, no, I've never heard of John Legend. And they're like, where have you been living, in a shoebox? And I'm like, well, actually, yes, I have been living basically in a shoebox. I only grew up being allowed to listen to Christian music. I wasn't allowed to listen to any worldly music. We had no television. There's no access to internet unless it's heavily controlled for certain purposes, like running their businesses. So there's all these brand new experiences. It's scary, it's exciting, and I'm just like, you just try to find your way. It's like you feel very wobbly, like a toddler trying new things, except that literally everything is new. And it's like that with anything in life that you try that's new. You feel that excitement, but also that scary,
Really
I don't know how
uncomfortable.
to do this. Yeah, it's so uncomfortable. Yeah.
And so I feel like it's one thing to be in a cult, but then it's another to have been a woman in a cult or
Yeah.
even a girl in a cult. And so, you were
Yeah.
told that, you're not meant to run businesses, you're not meant to wear certain clothes, you are not meant to deal with money, you're not meant to have sex before marriage, all of these sorts of things. And
Yeah.
so how was that dealing with, those sorts of things, all of a sudden doing that, going
Yeah.
against what you had been taught?
Yeah, it took time and a lot of conversation and support from people around me. So even the conversation about the fact I believed it was a sin because I'd been taught that women were not to wear pants. You could not wear pants. It was a sin. So I had a conversation one day with my dad, and we were both deconstructing this idea that, well, why is it a sin? And where's the proof in the Bible that says this? And really, is that relevant to this day and age? And we were asking all of these questions to really go, is what we believe true? Maybe it's not true anymore. Maybe we can reach for a belief that's slightly different, not even so far away. I didn't go from suddenly believing heaven and hell existed to then believing they're not. It's just whatever is
Gradually.
close enough for me to grasp that I was like, okay, it's okay for me to wear pants. I don't have to not be a Christian. I can still be a Christian and I can wear pants.
Yeah.
And that's that journey of growth and change that we all go on as we're exploring anything new in our lives.
Did it feel helpful that you were navigating this with some of your family members at the same time? Like it wasn't just you?
Yeah. So That's such a good question because yes, it did. But then there's also the part where my journey's my journey and theirs is theirs. So my faith deconstruction process is going to look completely different to what theirs looks like. And I needed to say to myself, well, you have permission now to ask questions. And I learned that through some of these experiences, through giving my best friend permission, through giving myself permission to wear pants. And suddenly I kind of said to myself, well, then I'm allowed to try things. And I wanted to have sex. And so I've been told sex is fornication. You're only allowed sex in marriage. You have to save yourself for a man, for a husband who then has ownership of your body, and your body now belongs to him. And then in marriage, your role is to please him and birth children for him. And then you be a mother, and that is your role as a woman. You're an obedient, submissive, meek woman who serves the church. So now I went, what does being a woman mean to me? What do I want that to look like to me? What do I actually want to say? What have I not been saying that I've only not been saying because someone told me I couldn't? And so I thought, well, I want to tell my story because I think that there are other people still in situations like this, and I'm free now and I have permission. So I want to give it to others. And the way I can do this, and the way I'd seen my grandfather, who's a cult leader, mind you, do this very powerfully, was through the power of storytelling. So I decided, well, I want to do it in my words, my way. Because when I was, I think 15, I made my church commitment vow when I was in Gloriavale. And at the time, there was a TV channel who was in there filming a documentary on the place. So I did my I did my commitment vow on national television.
No way.
And yes, and I wrote on my hand in little blue like pen my notes that I was going to say. And when I looked down at my notes, they'd rubbed off because my hands were sweating. So I lost those words that I had written on my hand. But it was probably a good thing because when I did eventually leave the church, I realized that I wanted to say my story and make a commitment to myself using my own words and my own voice in the way that I wanted to. So I decided I was going to write a book. Now, I was not a writer, mind you. Never written a book in my life. Wrote a fantasy story in high school that I thought was super terrible and thought I am a terrible writer. But I thought, well, I can try new things, right? Can't I? Like, I'm allowed to. And so I wrote my story into a book, and it was published by Ellen and Unwin. And when my publisher called me and she said, we're going live, it's published, I thought, oh my God, no one's going to buy it. No one is going to want to listen to this story. Why am I the one to do this? Like, I'm a terrible writer. No one will buy it. And then the next emails and messages that I got from my publisher was like, you're number 3, you're number 1. And I was a number 1 best-selling author now. Someone who didn't believe that they could be was now a number 1 best-selling author because I told my story in my voice and my words. And that was really evidence to me of the power of storytelling. So that was kind of how I got to that point where I was wanting to speak out.
That's incredible. And what's the name of the book for anyone that does want to read it? Because we could talk about your story alone for hours and hours and hours. So yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah, if anyone wants to read my book, it's called Daughter of Gloriavale, My Life in a Religious Cult.
Okay, I will link that below. Moving on from your story a little bit, where did the TEDx talk come shortly after the book or as a result of the book?
Yeah, so what started to happen is I was now building my brand online. I was speaking out. It wasn't just the book. It was everything I was putting out on social media. I built myself a website. I was building a brand presence and I was building assets for myself across the board.
And did that have an intention in the beginning?
To a degree. My only purpose was that I wanted to tell my story.
Got it.
But my mother was the highest ranking woman in Gloriavale. She was what we called the house mother, and she had financial skills that she had passed to me. She's an accountant now. So I knew that I could turn this into something that created wealth for myself. Again, women are not to be business owners, women are not even to speak, but women are also not even to have money and definitely not run a business, right? Mm-hmm. But I was, again, you have permission to do these things and be these things. You have permission to step into whatever that looks like for you. And so I thought, well, I can make money doing this. So when people started reaching out to me through the brand that I had created, and also I just want to make a note that I had also done web development and graphic design at a young age in Gloriavale to assist them with their businesses. So I had some of these skills that I could now use. So I started to apply the skills that I'd learnt in a completely different field into what I wanted to do now, because skills are transferable and they're learnable. And so when people started to reach out to me and tell me that they love their story, and then I would go back and I'd just build relationships with people and have conversations with them. And then if they had an event that they wanted me to potentially go to, then I would make an offer to them. Mm-hmm. And so we negotiated speaking fees, we'd negotiate travel arrangements, and this is really how I became a public speaker. I've spoken at business conferences, I've spoken at workshops, masterclasses, events, and they are so many of them that I have spoken at have been sold out because I use the power of storytelling in all of my events to capture and draw people in. And mind you, remember, I didn't think my story was important or interesting. And often we don't. Our stories are so ordinary to us. But for someone outside of us, our stories are extraordinary because they're not ordinary to them. And so I started to turn this into a serious business, and I was flying around the country and I was building a health business on the side of that. And so that was really how I started to step into this branding space and be a public speaker and be a brand coach.
Amazing. Yes. So I know that you are obviously a brand coach now. You obviously decided to become that and help other people with that due to the benefits and the transformations that building a personal brand and sharing your story had on yourself. So before we move into, your best tips for coaches and consultants and online service providers who are listening to this today, I'd be really curious to hear from your perspective and opinion, what is the importance for coaches and service providers and consultants to have a story and share their story and build a personal brand? What is the significance of that you have experienced and that you have helped your clients to experience too?
Yeah. So anyone who wants to differentiate themselves in the market needs to have a brand story. And there is not a single business that doesn't have a story behind it. Every single business is built on some kind of story, whether it's a customer story, whether it's a personal story, whether it's a hero narrative, whether it's a rags to riches narrative. Every business is telling their customers something about what they are offering their customers, how it's going to help their customers and transform the lives of their customers. And this is brand storytelling. And it's so important with personal branding, which is what I specialize in, through personal story, because this is how you differentiate yourself in your market, because no one has your unique way of looking at the world. No one has my unique experience of 1, living in a cult, 2, learning graphic design when I was very young, 3, growing up in child abuse, 4, ultimately leaving the cult. You can see as we layer it up, I'm also Maori, I'm also living in New Zealand. So there's all these specific things about me and my life that make up my brand. And I really do not see a personal brand as being separate from you. But what we see happening so often, and one of the biggest mistakes I see, is that people are trying to build personal brands without it being personal. It's literally called a personal brand, but then you're not telling any personal stories to your clients and your customers. You have no audience connection. You're thinking that business is separate from you. But
Mm.
with personal branding, it's not. And especially if you're a consultant or a coach, it is about you because you are selling yourself as the service, as the package, as the offer. And so this is where with the AI's coming out, right? And everyone's like, oh my God, we're drowning in AI. Everyone's going to have skills now. Everyone's going to be able to write brilliantly. But the truth is, AI doesn't also have your story. It can help you articulate your story and make your story more powerful so that you have a strong position in the marketplace. But it's not going to ever replace your story because your story is deeply human. And so this is how important it is to
It's going to
bring
become even more
story into
important due
branding.
to AI, is what I'm realizing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this because I really hope that people recognize that everyone does have a story to share and that this is so important. And when you look at all
Yeah.
the most influential people in the world, they all have a story. You know, when we think of
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, you know, the founder of Apple, like we know his story, we know Oprah Winfrey's story, we know Tony Robbins' story, you know,
Yeah.
whoever you're inspired by, of course. There are these stories,
Yeah.
like even all religions, they have these powerful stories behind them. And when I've gone to seminars, you
Right.
know, Tony Robbins, who's, you know, arguably one of the top, you know, coaches in our industry, right? When I've gone to his seminars, it's just storytelling the whole time. And he
Mm.
captivates people for days,
Mm.
days at a time. And there's no distractions because he's nailed the craft of storytelling. And people, you know, go to the movies and they read books and they buy books because people love stories. And
Yeah.
a great story follows a particular sequence. I know that there's a skill and a strategy to it, and that's where what you
Yeah.
do becomes so, so important. I'm really curious to hear, you know, I definitely agree storytelling is so important. And when I look at what's actually helped me make, you know, millions of dollars, it's definitely been
Mm.
sharing my story and doing storytelling, right? But
Yeah.
what do you have to say for someone who feels like they don't have a story or, you know, they don't have some cool transformation like you do where you've been in a cult and now you're out of it, like all
Mm.
these, you know, really big things. Like, yeah, what do you have to say to someone that's like, okay, I want a personal brand, I want a story, but nothing's really
Yeah.
happened in my life?
Yeah, that's super interesting because if nothing's ever happened in your life, then why are you consultant or coach anyway? You're a consultant or a coach so that you can help someone with something. And it's because you're an expert in this field because you've learned something that helps them
Yeah.
move from point A to point B. And so that is a story. You have a story of how you did it. You have a story of how you've helped your clients do it. You have a story somewhere about
Why it's important to you.
why it's important and why you do what you do. So people often think they don't have a story, but it's simply because they haven't taken the time to sit down and find a story. And so this is a really important piece that I do with everyone who comes into my world. The first thing we do is we find all of your stories because people don't even know they have these stories. The moment I get them to start writing them down, it's like a fountain of stories starts spilling out of them. And they're like, oh my gosh, I did do this. I did overcome that breakup. Oh my gosh, I did, you know, live my life as a single mum and made my own way and built a brand for myself. Like, so we all have these stories which we feel are rather ordinary because they've just been our journey. But you literally cannot go through life not having a story. It is impossible for any human on the planet to not have a story. Literally, if you woke up today and breathed,
There's
your
a story
story is that
within
you
that.
woke up today and breathed. Like,
Yeah.
so it's impossible for you not to have a story. It's also impossible for you to have a business without a story. You
Hmm.
already have a story there that's running in the background, whether you are aware of it or not. The
Hmm.
point is to find the story that you are not aware of and bring it to the forefront so that you are intentionally building your brand on this very clear, articulate story that people are wowed and captured by. And it's like, you know, when you see a really nice car drive past and you can't help but turn your head. That is what a good brand story does. People can't help but like stop and look at you and want to know more.
Yeah, that's so true. Very, very powerful. So, okay, we know the importance of storytelling and building a personal brand, and we know that with AI and more competition in the space, for lack of a better word, that it's going to become even more important to have that unique standpoint. What
Yeah.
tips can you give people that are wanting to start building a personal brand and a personal story? Because I know you have a very specific framework that you teach, and you even taught it to all of my clients inside Scale School the other day, and everyone loved it.
Yeah.
So could you dive deeper in that to help everyone here listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll walk you through the framework I use because this is the what has worked for me. It helped me become a number one best-selling author. It helped me turn my story into a business for myself. It helped me build a brand presence. So the first part is you really have to own your story. If you don't, if you feel shame about your story, if you feel that you don't even have a story, then you're basically flushing money down the toilet.
Yeah.
So I had to, when I first started, for me, my stories are a little bit heavy, right? And there were a lot of people in my world at that time who would look at the way I was raised, and bear in mind, it was just the way I was raised, right? But they would say, oh, that's a funny farm. Oh my gosh, like that's so weird. And as a child or a teenager trying to find their way in the world, this is really like
Hard
quite
to get.
hurtful. You're
Yeah.
trying to integrate into a society that's saying the way that you were raised isn't acceptable.
It's wrong.
And it's wrong. And you're not okay because of how you were raised. Did I make any choices about where I was born? No. Did I make any choices to be raised there? No. This was just my life. And so I really decided I'm going to get rid of any shame around the telling of my story. None of this is my fault. None of what has happened to me or what I've been through is shameful, and I can be vulnerable with people about this. And if they judge me, so fucking be it. Does the criticism hurt? Sure. But does it stop me? No. And so that was really important, that piece, especially when you want to tell your story around your personal brand, is to really own everything that has happened to you. And the stories that most connect with people are the hard ones, the ones that have pain in them. And I don't believe there's a single human being who's been through this world who hasn't experienced pain. It is a normal part of the human existence, pain and pleasure. Everyone has it. And so the painful stories are often what connect most to your client, and then with their pain, and then the pleasure stories are where you can take them, the transformation you can help them with, and whatever product you're selling them that helps them have that pleasure. So it's very simple, right? The second piece is you need to build your story. So it's not enough to just know that you have, okay, I've got a story. You need to intentionally market and build that story into the world so that people can hear you, so you have brand assets out there, so you have a powerhouse presence that positions you as an authority in your niche, so you can charge the prices that you are worthy of charging, and that your value is truly reflected in your brand. And this is one of the other things that people often miss. They don't understand brand positioning. I used to not even know what brand positioning even meant. But really what it is understanding that you can create a story of your brand in your customer's mind, and that story determines how much money they are willing to give you. And that allows you to set your rates at a premium rate that reflects your true value. But if you don't give your customer that story, they are not convinced of your worth. They are not convinced of the value you're going to give them. And this is what brand positioning and building your story truly does. And the last piece, which is really important, is you need to learn to sell your story. And this is where, sure, you've got content out there, you've got a powerful brand presence that's positioned well, but if you don't learn the skills to actually turn that into money in the bank and drive profit margins for your business, then what is it all for? You basically have a mission with no money attached to it, which is fine if you're running a charity, but I'm not running a charity. I have a family to feed. I have a mortgage to pay. And I believe, as part of our self-worth and actually owning your story, that if I'm going to put this much value in the world, then there should be a fair exchange of value returned to me.
So that you can sustainably do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Otherwise, I'm just giving and giving and giving, and what comes back to me?
You can't pour from an empty cup, it allows you to give your all, it's so important.
Yeah. And so those are the three pieces.
Own your story, build your story, sell your story.
Yes.
I love
And that's
this.
a complete business model for any brand.
Yes. And what would be the difference between a coach, for example, who, like you said, everyone has a story. So a coach who isn't using or leveraging a story versus someone who is? What's the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So, someone who is using their story, and you probably know someone like this already, will be getting followers online. They will be able to turn those followers into leads and they will be able to generate business income from that. And they're all doing it based around a message and a mission that they love as their most powerful and authentic self.
Yep.
Someone who hasn't developed this into their brand is usually feeling incredibly frustrated that why am I not getting leads coming into my world? Why can I not convert them? Also, why am I not getting speaking engagements? Oh, I want to write a book, but how do I even go about doing that? And you know, they're struggling and don't know where to go. But when you have a clear structure laid out in front of you that you can simply follow from someone who has done it before and can tell you just, you know, point and jump basically, which is what I've done with all of my mentors. If they say do it, I do it
You
because I
do.
want the result that they have. So I'm not going to sit here and think that I am an expert when I have paid them good money to teach me what they know that I am not an expert in.
Yep.
So that's what I would say is, you know, that's the difference between having a powerful, strong brand story. And it's about you too, your ability to have confidence in your brand, to really shine and to really feel like your brand is a reflection of you, your power, your value.
This is so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing this. And, your framework just makes so much logical sense to me. And, you know, when I reflect back on, my story, I can see it really did go in this order. I had to own my story to begin with because, when I first started my business, I was a mindset coach and my story was really around my dad had a gambling addiction and it broke my family apart and we had to move overseas unexpectedly. There were so many challenges that came from that and I felt lost and stuck and not good enough. And I didn't own that for a long time because I was like, that's
Yeah.
not my story. That's my dad's story. It wasn't in my control. It was all happening to me and all of this sort of thing. And so I can see how you do actually have to own your story before anything else can come about that. So I can see that that is something naturally that I did over time, feeling safe, sharing obviously the parts, out of respect to others that I do feel comfortable sharing, but owning that actually this is my story too. Yes, my dad might have
Yeah.
caused it, started it, whatever, but I've got my own perception and experience in that. Just like you said,
Yeah.
today around, you had your own unique experience that was different to your family and all of these sorts of things, and you get to own that. And then I can see there's the actual skill set of learning to build it because I would dabble in sharing my story a little bit, but didn't really have the skill set. But then when I learned how to actually build the story and share it in long form ways, short form ways, and
Yes.
written, audio, all of these things, I can really start to see this grabbed attention. I could compare a post where I'm just sharing generic tips versus one where I'm vulnerable and I'm
Yeah.
personal and I'm diving deep. That is the one that gets all of the engagement, the followers and the views and the acknowledgement and the people reaching out all of a sudden. And then,
Yeah.
that's then leads to that third part of like naturally it then made me money, like, and even
Yeah.
today when I run, free workshops, I am sharing my story. And that is the part that moves people. And that is the part people relate to and connect to, not necessarily always the specific circumstances sometimes, but it's the feelings, it's the journey, it's the parts that they insert themselves in. And I can really see how your framework just makes so much sense. So I just wanted to share that so people had like another angle to be able to view the significance of this, because truly when I think about what really sells, when people tell me why they buy from me, they're
Yeah.
not saying, oh, you've just got the best tips ever. I'm not saying that they also don't respect and appreciate that. They want my system, they want my framework. But the thing that gets them in the door, staying, engaging, reaching out, booking a call with me, it's my story. And when I ask them why they buy, they say it's your energy. But when they say it's my energy, I know what that really is that is my, you know, emotion and vulnerability and storytelling that is
Yeah.
creating that energy and connection versus if I was like, step one is this, step two is this.
Yeah.
That doesn't create
It's how
energy.
you show up, right?
Yeah, sharing that
Yeah.
personal story is
But
what
that's your
creates that
brand
energy.
presence.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
That is what they're
They're
buying.
saying energy because
Authenticity.
it's, yeah.
That's just their articulation. But I know the layers
Yes.
deeper is that there's a
Mm,
connection there. They like, know, and trust me. And they like, know, and trust me because I'm sharing parts of me. I'm sharing my story versus they're not going to
yeah.
have that connection and that trust if I'm just sharing tips, even if those tips are freaking amazing, if there's no story and connection to lead into that, it just doesn't land. You could just ask ChatGPT for the tips.
Yeah.
You could just say,
Absolutely.
hey, chat, how do you write a brand story? But it
Yeah.
doesn't have that same effect and depth and resonance without the story connecting the significance of it. And that is the importance of what you do. And I really wanted to share and acknowledge that.
Yeah, amazing. And like, look, if anyone's listening and doesn't believe us, you go find the most successful person that you know in your industry, and then you ask them if building a brand and and using storytelling in business is important. And if they say no, well, then I will stand corrected. But I think that, not surprisingly, they will say yes. It's so vital to the core
So
of any
important.
business. Yeah.
Companies spend millions and millions and millions of
Oh my
dollars
God.
nailing
Yeah.
this because it's so
Yeah.
important to get this right. So, for those that are wanting to get this right and have the support so that they can build a strong personal brand, maybe become a TEDx speaker, be in
Yeah.
media, on the news, on podcasts, get their story out there so that they can actually stand out from the crowd. Can you tell everyone how they can find you on socials and how they can even work with you?
Yeah, totally. So I'm Lilia Tarawa, Lilia Tarawa on Instagram. Shoot me a DM there and we can have some chats. Other than that, just reach out to support@liliatarawa.com and I can contact you there. And I'm also Lilia Tarawa on all platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. It's luckily I have a pretty unique name, so I managed to get the handle across all the different platforms. So,
I love
but
that it's the same
Instagram or
handle.
email.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
love
know. My OCD brain's like, oh, that's so nice and relaxing
because
to
that
have it
is
the
pretty
same.
important for a personal brand, being able to
I
actually
know.
find you everywhere. That's why I use my middle name because Sofia Bernardi was taken on places, but Sofia Rose Bernardi wasn't. So that is actually why I use my
Yes.
middle name. Um, this has been so powerful, and for anyone listening or watching right now, I just want you to know, as someone who actually works with Lilia, like she is so generous with her time, her effort, her energy. Like I said, she ran a really powerful workshop inside Scale School, and everyone was obsessed because of the storytelling nature that Lilia
The
actually
chats are
brought
popping
in.
off.
Yes, and now she's got a part-time job basically answering questions in Scale School,
Answering questions.
giving feedback because it was just so powerful and everyone could really see, oh, this is my missing piece and I need this. So thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just so grateful that you shared your story and that you shared your expertise here today so that everyone listening can actually start, being more seen in their space and known in their space to make more money, help more people and create more authority too. So thank you so much.
Oh, kia ora, tēnā koe.